on behalf of the Lakes Region Genealogy Interest Group, we're welcoming all of you here. We have a few of us here in the Bradley room, and we have several of you joining us on Zoom. We're so sorry we cannot see your lovely and handsome faces, but we miss you. So we're welcome to all of us here who are helping tonight. So happy that you were able to come out in the weather. Thank you so much for being here. We want to thank Jane, Carolyn, who's on Zoom down in Massachusetts, Sarah Lucas, who is helping us with the Zoom room, Gil, Jake, and Wolfeboro Community TV. Our best to Jeffra, who is at home with family illnesses, and Norma is in stormy Rhode Island, surrounded by sandbags. So our announcements are the Irish SIG group will wrap up in October with our surname studies as a recap and sharing of new resources. So please be alert to your emails from Norma, and she will keep you posted on the Irish SIG. And also next month, we will be having our Lakes Region meeting here in the Beaver Room. And Norma will be conducting that, and it's on the 27th of October, and it's using maps in your family research. So that will be a Zoom and in-person meeting also. Our German genealogy group will be meeting in October 19th, and also November 16th, they will be meeting, and there's no meeting in December. So we will go through our presentation and ask those of you on Zoom if you can mute your microphones. We certainly appreciate that. We will have comments, questions, and answers after the presentation. Those of you on Zoom, if you want to send your questions via the chat, and then after the presentation we can have Sarah relay those to us. If there's some way through this technology to hear you, we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to turn the time over to my husband, Gil, who's going to get us started.
As it says on the slide here, the primary objective in this session is to talk about writing your life story and the fact that it really is a gift for future generations. If we learn how to do that, writing our life story, then it's very easy for us to write stories about our ancestors. And those are really fun just because we can help our extended family understand some of the things that we've learned. So all the things that Dee is going to talk about in writing your own life story are applicable to writing a story for your ancestor. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an account of how I have come to know my mother's youngest brother. And this is going to be in two parts. I'm going to tell you how it came about that I learned about him. And then at the very end of Dee's presentation, I've got I think, a special treat for you that lasts about 5 minutes that will take what I'm going to tell you here in the beginning and put it all together in a way that really tells a story that attracts the interest of family. Because we all know that when we try to talk about our special learning experiences of family to other family members, it's kind of hard to keep them awake. But at any rate, so I'm going to talk about, as I said, my mom's youngest brother, Carl Stanley Spragg, born in 1920, died in 1945. And Carl was the youngest of 7 siblings, and he was my mother's youngest brother. I've only met, and I won't ever have another chance because they're all gone, 3 of my mother's siblings. Her oldest brother, William Guilford, her sisters Florence, and another sister, Minnie Pearl. But I really only knew William. And I had no idea that my mom had 3 other siblings, nor did she ever speak of them, nor did I ask about them. I recall one discussion in 1967 with William as I said goodbye to him prior to going to serve in Vietnam. And his final comment to me was, "Don't try to be a hero." And William and I spent a lot of time together in a boat fishing for trout. And you'd think I would learn something other than fishing from him, but really it was only fishing because he insisted there be no conversation in the boat. We would disturb the trout. So that's why I didn't learn anything. But at the moment when he said that to me, I thought, well, this must be something to do with Uncle Bill's experience in World War II in the Marine Corps. And then back to Carl. Carl was born in Maine, and he served in World War II, but he was killed in action in Glauchau, Germany, 2 months before I was born, less than a month before VE Day, and I had no idea why I bore his middle name. I knew that the Guilford in my name came from my Uncle Bill, but I didn't know really that Carl Stanley was the reason why I had that middle name. And I never asked my mom about it. But this goes back probably 10 to 12 years ago when this all started to unfold and began to learn about it. So in 2013, I began to understand some idea about Carl and his Army service. And he married a woman by the name of Elizabeth Guthrie, 1941 in Alabama. I used a number of different resources in order to get a little bit of information, and the U.S. government did supply me with some really critical stuff, but it takes forever to get it. Now I think it's a little bit better. But based on preliminary basic information that I put in Ancestry.com in about 2013, I was contacted by a woman by the name of Leslie Nelson. She sent me a message saying that her mother was married to Carl. Well, that was news to me. And we began to speak. And then we found, this was all by phone, she lives in Indianapolis. And then we found the marriage document. And then finally, Leslie and her husband came to New Hampshire to visit us in 2016, because we had exchanged a lot of information at that point. Leslie's mother remarried after Carl was killed. Carl and Elizabeth had no children. So the thing that's particularly interesting as a little sidelight is that in Leslie and her husband's visit here in New Hampshire, they brought a couple of gifts. One of them was Leslie brought an account, a really fascinating, detailed picture account of her mom. But she wanted me to know about her mother, and she always called, regardless of the truth of it or not, that she was my aunt. But anyhow, it was a great gift. And her husband, in his visit, he really grew attracted to loons, and he's a wood carver. So he carved this loon, sent it to us as sort of a recognition of his appreciation. The other thing that Leslie did for me was the one thing that she was able to find in her mother's, I guess, some kind of a storage cabinet. She found the decorations that Carl had received as a serviceman in World War II. Well, I was really thrilled with all of it, but thrilled with this especially. To be able to have these and for her to be willing to give them to me. So that's kind of a little side road. We still stay in touch with Leslie and communicate quite frequently. And the one thing that, just so you understand, Leslie's mother, Elizabeth, never told her about their previous marriage. Her previous marriage to Carl. So she was kind of fascinated by how this thing started to unfold. And then she started to put some pieces together because she remembered pension checks that her mother was receiving and a few other little things that had happened along the way. In some of the efforts to understand Carl, Dee and I made a trip up to Bangor, Maine, and we went to the grave of Carl Stanley Spragg. And I still remember going into that graveyard, a huge graveyard with as many paths into the different areas of the cemetery as you could count. We went on one path, decided to stop, and we were right next to his grave. It still gives me chills to think about that. We've also managed to find a few slides of pictures, and this one really threw us for a loop, because all of a sudden we see Carl and what is Elizabeth, his wife, and holding a baby. My golly, they must have had a child, but that's not the case. This happens to be a child of Carl's brother, and so that didn't pan out. But it was nice to see this image of them together. And another little thing that happened along the way was to learn a little bit about enhancing photographs and how they can embellish a story and help you to tell a story a little bit better. But you can see on the left, that happens to be about as good as it can be enhanced in a black and white. And then when it gets colorized, you see it even gets a little bit more personality to it. But that's another part of the story. Obviously, there were newspaper articles that we found along the way, and a number of different things. The one thing that was really the most revealing about Carl's life is just portrayed by this letter down in the bottom center. Actually, there's about 6 pages, and it's enormous detail about his military service. And it comes from 2 people who knew him personally. One was his bunkmate, and the other was his chaplain, or a commanding officer. His bunkmate was the chaplain. And also to learn late along the path, I don't know exactly when we went to the Bangor Public Library, but we walked into the library, and on the far right, you can see Carl S. Spragg. Well, in that library, right in the very front of when you walk into it, they have a glass enclosed booklet that has a photograph and a story for each of the World War II Mainers that were killed in action. And it's a wonderful tribute. It was written by his sister. But that was found later in the process. So there's just a whole lot of things that go together to give us some idea about his life and to sort of make him come alive in our minds. And always still continue looking for information. So what I mentioned was, I'm going to take this information that you see here and put it into a different format, and in a little over 5 minutes share that with you at the end. I'm excited to see your reaction to what finally came out. But that's it for me, and I'll turn it back over to Dee.
After that, I'm going to, kind of hard to not cry when we think about Carl. It's very emotional, isn't it, when we work with our ancestors? Gil loves his Uncle Carl, and I love him too. And we've learned so much about him. It has been and continues to be a part of the incredible journey of family history, searching and getting to know our ancestors. I cannot tell you how excited I am about the little things I have learned in working on this presentation. When, as a LRGIG group, our Lakes Region group, we talked about this idea in class, I had just received a wonderful gift from my daughter for Mother's Day. It was from the company called Storyworth. I'm sure you've heard about it and seen commercials on TV. How many of you know about this? Have you heard about Storyworth before? No, okay. So at any rate, in working with Storyworth, this is a slide of some of the books that you can get with Storyworth. And I'm going to go through this just a little bit and tell you a little bit about some of the things that I've learned. Okay, so with Storyworth, it tells you how it works, okay? It's like a conversation. You know, once a week you choose a question to inspire you to write. They simply reply with an email, which is shared with you. At the end of the year, their stories are bound into a beautiful keepsake book. Well, you can you can do more than one question a week. and you have the ability to change the questions. You have the ability to answer that question, and then you can save it, and then you can come back and edit it. So their package includes the hard, the book, and you get to choose the book, and so you can purchase extra books. So it's $39. So you can see what this costs. I just want to go through this quickly. And so if you want, I can send this PowerPoint to you, but you can get online, and you can search on Storyworth. So you can choose the questions, and you can edit them on your own, and you have full flexibility with the topics that you can tell. So if you don't prefer to choose those questions, you can receive questions randomly, and you can change it. So it's really flexible, just to let you know. It's very flexible. You can put photos in. You can include the photos with your email response or online. It's very easy. It's high resolution photos with 300 DPI. Use JPEG, PNG. So it's just what you're used to doing with your photos. You can put those in and upload them in it. So, and this is just what it looks like for me. I go in and log in to the account, and it just says start a new story, write from scratch. What are some of your they give you a new question, and it comes up on your computer and on your email, and it's fine. It's really nice. I really, really appreciate my daughter giving this to me. And it kind of, I wasn't really wanting to do my life story. I said, okay, when she gave it to me, Daddy and I can do it together. And she said, no, Mom, I'm going to get one for Dad. So anyhow, it gives me, it's not something I've ever really wanted to do, is write my story. But I like some of the questions. If I get a question that says, who's the funniest person in your family? Well, I know who that is. That's all. My brothers, I have the funniest brothers. I have 3 older brothers, and they were so funny. So it's easy. I pick the easy questions that I want to answer. And so it gives you a chance to kind of get used to writing about yourself. And the fact is, you can just write a little bit, and you can come back and you can edit it. And it's very nice. And so I heard one question, they said, well, why do I have to wait a whole year? Can I answer these really quickly? I want to get this book done. Say you want to give it for a gift or something for someone. So they say you can. You have so many pages, I think 480 pages or something. I can't remember. But you can do what you want with that. So there is some flexibility. They are now doing this where you introduce the celebration book. So you can do a different book. As you know, on the internet, there's everything, right? You can search for everything, every kind of book that you want to do. So you can do a celebration book, or you can do a book about a birthday, and you can join in. You can have, but you can't really, it's kind of sad because you can't really have somebody else in your family join on that unless they send it to you. Because if you have another person that's writing on it, they have to get the subscription also. So it's kind of a little bit. So you can have you can go out to your family members and say, okay, I'm doing this story about Mom for Mother's Day. Write me some of your memories. Okay, so you can do that, and then you can put it in yourself. So anyhow, writing your life story is a gift you leave for the future. So I think every one of us here and on Zoom know how important it is to write your life story. I don't know, with Gil writing about his uncle, I think maybe that spurred him on to wanting to write his own story. So when I started with this, and Carolyn Purcell and I were given the task of putting this presentation together, and so we went out and we did some research online, and she has lists and lists of places that you can search. And that. You can find whatever is available. But we did come up with this one article that was in the Family Tree magazine, and it was written by Richard Campbell and a Cheryl Svensson. And so, and I like this. He says the best book you'll ever read is the one you write your life story. And it can be as easy as writing a love story. Well, when you look at it that way, it kind of makes you think a little bit, no, maybe this isn't too hard to do. And I guess once I started reading more and more about this, I kind of got a little bit more excited about trying to do this because it gave me a better feeling about everything. So she says, Miss Svensson says that how can we reopen the floodgates of wisdom that pass between generations? And she's director of a Center for Autobiographical Studies. So she spent 20 years working with older adults who want to write their life story. During that time, she's noticed an increase in interest in life stories or memoir writing. Hope I can say that all night. And she says more and more older people understand that unless they write their story, it will be lost. Or as one man says, I'll just be a name scribbled on the back of a faded photograph. Well, we know what, we don't want to be that, right? So a quick scan of the internet will find very little terms of maintaining intergenerational connections beyond social media. The few resources on the subject suggest just the unusual platitudes, spending more time together, do things together, create new memories together. But for most Americans, this is not the reality. Social visits are formal and stilted and may happen only once a year or twice a year. Because why? We're all scattered all over. So he starts talking about, and this is the book that he and Cheryl wrote together. And it's called Writing Your Legacy. And he says in this article, he says, face your fears. And we all have these fears. I'm not a writer. He said, well, here's the good news. If you have ever composed a love letter or written an email, you can tell your story. You are a writer. But what about your writing style? We've all heard how famous authors have their own unique tone. You say loud and clear, that's not me. But that love letter, it was authentic. You pouring it out from your heart. So he says the real question is, how can I connect with multiple generations? The answer is write as you speak. Ignore the critic on your shoulder and just write as you would talk. Let the dialogue flow like a good conversation. Forget grammar, forget spelling, just get your thoughts down. You can edit later. Now imagine your unique voice reaching across from one generation to the next far more powerfully than social media could. So he says, perhaps the most challenging part of writing a compelling life story is getting started. The most obvious way is to begin at birth and move chronologically. Is that right? And what do you think? But that doesn't work. It says, pick up any recent memoir and look at the first few pages. Rarely do they start at birth. Instead, they usually start, a Latin term for into the middle of things. So that's true because when you think about it, when are we going to start with our parents? If you're starting with your parents, you know, you've got to go back to the dates. What do we remember when our parents were younger? We don't remember that much when our parents were younger, do we? So starting in the middle sounds like a better way. He says, structure your story around themes. I kind of like this because I can do a theme, just like I can do the little question that was on the Storyworth site, maybe a theme. And so he says, let's look at one writing process that can make your life story project enjoyable and manageable, a guided autobiography. It takes a do-it-yourself approach in structuring your life story, featuring short vignettes. Each 2 to 3 page stories focus on specific topics that include family, work, self-image, spirituality, and life goals in a guided autobiographical theme. Not time drives your story. So if you think of it that way, if you think about doing this in a theme, then you can, just like if I thought about my brothers being the funniest guys that I know in our family, I can think of so many wonderful stories that's happened with what my brothers have done over the years. Like when I was a little girl, and my brothers would be watching TV, watching a baseball game, and they'd say, "Dee Dee, run down to the grocery store down the alley, and it's dark." I'm thinking to myself, and we're going to time you, and we're going to time you and see how fast you go. Well, let me tell you, it was dark, and I ran my legs off, and I get back, and I get in the door, and they say, "Give me those Pepsis." Yeah, and how fast was I? Oh, I don't know. So I mean, they were always, I was the baby of the family, so they were always picking on me. So you can pick themes based on your personal life and personal values themes. You might find something more relevant in life after retirement. So he says, where do you start? Identify a key branching point in your path. We all have hundreds of these moments that change us in significant ways. Some are obvious: parents' divorce, a serious disease, while others are more subtle but equally important. A random day in school when you realize you had a passion for a favorite subject. Choose one event to get your creative juices flowing. Compose a short 2 to 3 page story about that event and write as if you were speaking. You probably already retold this story many times before. The only difference is that now you're doing so in writing. Repeat the same process for many life themes. Add some photos, and the result will be a completed personal life story, suitable for family and friends. Do you think about that? Does that kind of give you a little better feeling about writing your things in your life? So you can think of all of these little things that happen, and it's easy. It can be a paragraph or a page, and you can just start trying. The next thing I went to research, and I found on Roots Tech, this gal by the name of Allison Taylor. And in 2019 in Roots Tech, and I'm going to send you the links to this video. You really need to see this wonderful video that she did. And it's how to write your life story in 5 pages or less. And this is the authors. I thought that was really cute. There they are when they were younger, and there they are now, the two of them. They have a company. It's called Pictures and Stories, and they've had this company for about, I think it was up here she said, 1994. And they save your life stories or your family history in a stunning, custom designed book that you will cherish for generations. So when I went through what she does and how she wrote a book, and this is her book. This is called How to Save Your Life One Chapter at a Time, a step-by-step guide to creating a life storybook. And she and her husband wrote this book. And I thought, as I read more and more about her and what she's doing, it's very similar to the writing the legacy and doing themes. She has chapters, and she also goes into themes. There's so much in both of these books that I would just love to show you every page, but I can't. So your now is the family history story of the future. So do we want our children to write our stories, or do we want to write our own stories? And this is the introduction on how to save your life. Since you are like no other being ever created since the beginning of time, you are incomparable. What is your life worth? Every day you have lived, you have made unique contributions to the world that no one else in history could have provided. Your life experiences have infinite value to your loved ones, to the future generations, possibly even to strangers you've never met. Yet the percentage of people who make an effort to capture their unique life stories and share them with others in a lasting way is quite small. We think this is an epic tragedy. This guide will show you how to save your life, capturing your life's most important stories and pictures in beautiful coffee table worthy books that you can share with loved ones and hand down to future generations. So yes, you can do that, and you can put it into a book that you can make, and there are other ways to do your stories and put them into books. And the important thing is you do it. However you put it together and however you bind it, you do it. It's lovely to have it in a book, and maybe you will put it into a book later on. Or maybe your children will do that for you. So you might be writing far, far into the future for the benefit of people not yet born. Perhaps you've decided to write your memoir, then put it in a safe deposit box to be read only upon your death. Or we sincerely hope this is not the case. You have terminal cancer and you might want a 2-year-old daughter to know who mommy was and how much you loved her. Writing to and for the future can be a powerful force. So you want to know who your audience is and you want to write it down. It might even be helpful to include an actual picture of your audience, a face or group of faces that can gain inspiration from you. So you want to know who your audience is going to be. And so we want to think, I know if we have children and grandchildren, we want them to know about us, and we want to write to them, of course. But sometimes these stories get over to other people, and they help other people that you never think that are going to read this. And what or when am I writing about what is the scope of your story? And then there's a purpose. And I can photocopy some of these and I can send them to you, and you can just kind of play with this. I'll send it to you in an email, and you can try to. She's given me permission. I did send Allison Taylor an email and asked her about using her some things from her class and from her book, and she, as long as I gave her the recognition that it came from them, and I certainly do not mind doing that. So here's purpose, audience, and scope. So you can write some of these things down. So these are some of the things that she has compared to what they did in writing for Legacy. Define your purpose, create a lifeline. She talks about a lifeline. Now, that's a timeline. And I don't know how many of you are on Family Search, but Family Search has a timeline. I'm not sure if Ancestry has a timeline. Ancestry has a timeline also. I know they write your story. They can write your little brief story for you on Ancestry, but Family Search has a timeline, and she really, encourages you draw a timeline of your life. Collect your personal history assets. That's your photos, your documents, other memorabilia, things that can contain that you might use for the project, or other items that you can use later. Select your stories, make story notes, write a first draft of each story segment, find a theme for your stories, edit and rewrite drafts, select and prepare your pictures, put it all together, celebrate and enjoy. So they both really have pretty much the same things in these books. And when you talk about a timeline, they both have this wonderful, this book is, pretty much a step-by-step guide. But they do go over the history. And I know on Family Search, when you go to the timeline, you can also click on Family Search and it will bring up the history. And I was pretty much amazed when we were looking at Gil's mother, and we were looking at her timeline. And I think when she was living in Bangor, Maine, I think the Russian U-boats, or is that what it was? were offshore at that time, and I was, German, gosh, excuse me, and they were offshore. And so I thought about her, and she was probably a teenager, and what it might have felt like to her. Well, I was trying to find, but in this book they have this wonderful timelines, you know, and what the history of the timelines, and that both of these books have this wonderful little history attached to timelines in your life. So an autobiography versus a memoir. So I'm thinking that he says here just a few ideas to roll around in your head when thinking about limited scope, again, from real people. So a children's book about my childhood. So you could just write a small book about that. My adventures in World War II. All of the horses I've owned as a metaphor for my life experiences. Funny stories from the 10 years I lived in Hollywood. A pictorial thank you to my grandmother. She told a story in one of her, Allison told a story in one of her videos about a woman that they did a book for. And she just wrote a story about, and put a book together, about her life in this very, very small town that she grew up out west. And so most of the people in that town, it was kind of divided. It was the poorer people, the people that were not as wealthy lived on one side of the town, and those that were a little more wealthy lived on the other side of the town. But back then, they had outhouses. And so everybody was the same in that degree, you know, that they all had houses. So sometimes the wealthy people had to sit beside those people that were not so wealthy. But she told a story about she had a little bear that was her companion, and she loved this little bear. So one night she went out. She had to go to the bathroom, and she went out, and had two little stalls, or am I saying that right? Yeah, holes in the outhouse, and so she brought her little bear with her. She went out and she sat down, and she sat the little bear right beside her, of course, while she was going to the bathroom. But what happened? The bear fell into the hole. Well, luckily it was a cold winter day and it was frozen. So her mom and dad came running out and dug out that sweet little bear and just put the bear in the wash. So everything was frozen up. So anyhow, there's just wonderful stories that you can tell. And she wrote a whole book about living in this small town. And you can think about that. I mean, Marty, you could tell a great story about all of you've done over there in Alton in the Historical Society. Maybe you don't want to. This man has spent how many years over in Alton? Too many. He's wonderful. So there's wonderful books that you can write. So, in your chapter books. So if you feel strongly that you want to tell a more comprehensive story of your life, as many people do, here's something to consider: your whole life, one chapter at a time. So some suggestions that they have here, and you can see this, I can send you this PowerPoint. Ancestry, family history, genealogy, growing up years, school days, college years, courtship and marriage, family life, working career, family lore and recipes. Some people do recipe books. Travels. Carl, you travel an awful lot. You've got lots of stories, I'm sure, with your travels. Yeah. Anyhow, so these are stories that you can, again, your audience and your scope. Who will read your book? For whom is this being made? So, and the scope, what is the scope of your life story project? Is there a particular period of time or theme you would like to focus on? This is just an example of her lifeline that she's got, and I can send you some of these little examples for lifelines, and you can, this is what you can do and how you can do it. You can do it on a spreadsheet or however you want to do it. And why should you record these? We're pretty sure that you already understand, at least on some level, the importance of telling your stories. Your life is worth saving. If you don't do it, nobody else will. It's cheaper than therapy. You pay attention to your financial assets. What about your emotional and spiritual assets? A recent insurance industry study found that both baby boomers and the elder generation were uncomfortable discussing the topic of leaving a financial inheritance, but both groups embrace the idea of leaving a legacy, which could include sharing family traditions, histories, stories, values, and wishes. They determined that non-financial items like ethics, morals, faith, and philosophy were 10 times more important than the financial aspects of inheritance. Winston Churchill says, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." If you died tomorrow, what would your posterity be left with? It's not just about your will. Would your loved ones inherit piles of dog-eared boxes stashed in the attic, overfilled with unmarked pictures, yellowing letters mixed in with back issues of Sports Illustrated, a computer scattered with thousands of photos with names like DMC, 0009134. If you haven't taken the time to go through those files and boxes, your children are even less likely to, and items of great value will end up in the dump. We passionately believe that everyone should record their life's most interesting and valuable experiences and send them out into the world for good. Whether you tell a story to a larger community or just to your family and friends, we promise that your story will have an impact perhaps beyond your ability to see or understand, perhaps on generations yet unborn. And what you did, who knows what you have done to save all of that, for generations yet unborn, what you have done. Our passionate belief in this worthwhile endeavor stems from years of working with people to record their unique life stories. With our company, Pictures and Stories Incorporated, we have guided hundreds of people through this process to preserve their experiences in beautiful books and videos. So you can do a video. You can do a video story of your life. There are many other things you can do. There are many ways you can do this. I like this. She talks about some stuff. One is just curated. Which would you rather have? Would you rather take? It's like taking a lump of coal, as much as you possibly can think of, and you just turn it into a diamond. So you just take pressure, time, and some polishing, and a diamond comes up. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to take all of this stuff that you've got, and you're going to turn it into a diamond. I wanted to go over some of the things that I love. I know Family Search and Ancestry both have these wonderful opportunities, but this is my grandfather, and on his, hanging over his shoulder was he worked at a factory down from where they lived, and that's his time clock. There is a story about this time clock that's hanging over his shoulder. But what I like with Family Search, and you can do I'm not sure if you can do the same thing in Ancestry yet. You can record a memory. If you see the microphone down at the bottom of this, underneath there it says record a memory. So you can look at that picture and you can record a memory. You can talk into and tell a story about that picture. Family Search has their centers where you go into the, now I've forgotten the names of them, isn't that? The Discovery Centers. And you go into the Discovery Centers, and they're just not all over the U.S. or the world yet. But you go into a Discovery Center, and you can do this yourself with your photos. And I would sit in a booth, and I could take my phone, and I could upload my pictures on my phone into this little booth. And they have this tablet that you carry about in this Discovery Center, and it hooks up to the pictures. And it's technically I can't remember how it works, but you hook it up, and then the pictures that come up from my phone go into and they come up. And so I am recording, I'm seeing these pictures and I'm recording what I see. So if you get a picture of your family that comes up and you're going to record a memory, and this is basically what you can do here. So I'm sorry, but that was very emotional for me to sit there and watch my photos of my family coming across, and I see them all the time. But when you're sitting there talking about that, and you think about those memories, and they come up, it was hard for me to handle. But I look at this even now of my grandfather, and he not wealthy at all, and I think about him, look, and his clothes and his shoes, and that he worked the midnight shift, and he'd walk around and do the time clock. And there is a story about this, and it's on Family. It's also on Family Search in the Memories Gallery, and that's my grandfather. And those are just some of the memories under his Memories Gallery. And you can add memories, stories, photos. You can add them to his memories. And you also have on Family Search, you have a gallery, where you can put all of your photos, stories, documents, audios on Family Search. But I love the fact that you can record these stories. You can talk about these things, and when you see them visually, to me, it's just a totally different story. And I was just trying to think, there is the time clock story by Anne, if you can see it down here in the corner. I should pull it up, but that's my Aunt Anne, my dad's youngest sister, and she actually just died about 3 years ago. So she told the story about her dad with the time clock and how he'd walk around. So there's technology is there for us to do all of this wonderful stuff. I've talked about this so many times in our classes, our iPads, our iPhones, and I think, Gil, you have the last 3 slides.
Okay, we're going to take a few more minutes and do the summary that I mentioned earlier about Carl, if I can get this to work. So just give me a second here.
I'm Carl Stanley Sprague. Let me tell you the story of my life. I was born on July 17, 1920, in Bath, Maine. My father, Sidney Lou Ellen Sprague, was born in 1878 in St. John, Canada. My mother, Agnes Maud Hope, was born in 1881 in Edinburgh, Scotland. When they married in 1903, my mother was 3 years younger than my father. I had 6 siblings: William, Pearl, Arthur, Agnes, Florence, and Neil. This picture was taken in 1929. My brother Neil is the tallest boy, and I am standing to his left. The other children are neighbors. I took Elizabeth May Guthrie, the love of my life, to be my wife on March 15, 1941, at age 20 in Russell County, Georgia. That was a day to remember. She was born in 1923 in Cusseta, Georgia. She was 17 years old when we married, 3 years younger than me. I lived in Bangor, Maine until 1938, when I graduated from Bangor High School, and then went to work in my aunt's sheep company business in Rawlins, Wyoming. In 1939, I joined the Army, and in 1942, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant armor, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Along with my oldest brother, Captain William Guilford Sprague, U.S. Marine Corps, and another older brother, Sergeant Neil Sprague, U.S. Army, we all served in World War II. Unfortunately, I never returned after being fatally wounded in combat in Germany. On April 13, 1945, I was on a mission near Glasgow, Germany, being assigned to clear a village when one of the tanks in my unit was pinned down and the men inside were trapped. In my effort to help them escape, I was shot by a sniper and evacuated. I succumbed to my wounds in the hospital on April 16, 1945. During the course of my service, I was decorated with the Bronze Star for Valiance, with 2 oak leaf clusters, as well as the silver star for the rescue of the trapped men on April 14th. I would like to read a letter written on April 25, 1945 by my chaplain and bunkmate, Captain James M. Ray, written to my wife, Elizabeth, as it tells more about me and what was important to me. The letter follows. My dear Mrs. Spragg, I became acquainted with your husband, Lieutenant Carl S. Spragg, before we left England. I was transferred to headquarters company, and my bunk was next to Carl's. During all of these intervening months, he has been a dear friend of mine. Yesterday, the news came to me that he has passed away on April 16th. Today, the men around the headquarters are all so heavy-hearted. Many eyes of the men are even red. They have just finished painting his tank, and the stencil for the new name was almost ready to be put on. In carefully fixed letters it read Carl S. So many of them have been so concerned about him since he was hit. Both among the officers and the men, Carl had so many friends. He laughed and made other people laugh. It was so easy for him. His presence in a room made such a difference. I have never seen so many of the men and officers affected by the loss of any one person. You will be happy to know that always and without fail, he was at my church services. Loyalty to the Lord and his worship was just part of Carl. It was on April 13, 1945, that he was hit by small arms fire in the chest. At our medical aid station, while he was being treated, I talked with him. After I prayed with him, it was so typical of Carl to say, "Thank you, Chappie." Carl asked if I could get your picture for him. He carried it in his map case, which was always with him. I hastily went over and had his men get it for me. I think it must be your latest one, probably in your Easter dress. He liked that picture so much. I was with him until about midnight. He was doing all right and was sleeping when I left. I saw again the next morning, April 14th, he was in the ambulance ready to be evacuated. He said he had rested all right. We had a brief prayer in the ambulance. That was my last opportunity to be with him. I am mindful that your heart will be broken while you read these intimacies, yet I felt you would like to know them. It has been a personal loss to me, and I mourn with you in your greatest loss. And I quote, "We mourn not as those who have no hope." I'm glad I shared my life story with you. I hope you found this interesting. Thanks for listening to my story.
That was wonderful.
Some people are weirded out by the animation of the individual, but I love it. I think it's great. If you're interested, this is free also. This is something that's in my heritage. And what they do is, like Dee was talking about, they give you a format, and the program itself will extract information about birth and death and locations. And you can write up the rest of what you want to say about the individual. For example, that letter, I read the letter, or I rewrote the letter so that it could be read in this animation. But it's just an example of a way to bring some life into an ancestor, and especially one that no one in the family really knew anything about. And all of a sudden, there's so much to know. And when people see the awards and things like that, they ask about him. So it's a fun way to remember your ancestors.
You see, we just showing the family tree. Thank you, Jane. Okay. Family tree apps, memory app, and Get Involved apps. So these are some apps that are available. And of course, they are available on your phones, and they are available on your iPads, okay? And the next ones are, that's Memories. And I love Memories app because I put it on my phone, and you can get on the Memories app, and you can record a story, and you can put all your photos and documents on there also, but you can just hit the plus sign and record, and you've got it in your hand. You can do it on your iPad also. And then there's My Heritage has their apps also. And yeah, so they've got Find Your Ancestors, and so they've got oh, that's Ancestry, excuse me. Find Your Ancestors and DNA and all these different apps, scan and restore photos, connect with your DNA matches, and then of course there's My Heritage. And they all, I think probably all of these sites probably have apps, and this is My Heritage. So animate old photos with deep nostalgia, so you can see that. So this is on, and these apps. And as Gil said, you can sign in for you can sign in for free with My Heritage. You don't have to use the subscription, and there's a certain limit that you can do on My Heritage for free. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Jake from Wolfeboro Community TV, and we'll be able to see this on the TV, hopefully with a lot of editing. You'll be able to see this on Wolfeboro Community TV on the YouTube channel and then on our playlist for Lakes Region Genealogy Interest Group. Thanks again. Good night, everybody.